Okay. Let's start putting these doors together. Interesting thing, I did these first when I was grooving them, and I had it perfect. It's actually a little snug. Things kind of change overnight a little bit. But as I was doing it, I ended up with this down the center, which that would tell you, your saw kerf is basically 1/8 of an inch. Well, that means that would be wider than 1/4 of an inch, right? I got this mortise chisel, real long 1/4 inch one here, and I just got to take out that little excess there on all the ones. Now this is very snug here, so this happens to me a lot. I don't worry about it because this dimension doesn't matter that much. What matters is that you get the bottom of that clean, so your panel seats all the way. That's your number one thing. So you can juxtapose, you kind of put this on a little bit of an angle and drag it through here. Anything it takes to knock that free so you can peel it out. And eyeball that. Now you could use an 1/8 inch, but the 1/8, you're going to do it more times with the 1/8 inch piece chisel. This will usually get it a little bit quicker. Usually, in case you guys don't know, whenever you have a camera running, things tend to go a little sideways. We'll do a dry fit. One of the things also, I cut these panels and it turned out they were too long because I measured from the edge of this mortise to the edge of this one and I added 1 inch. Well, because these are 1/2 inch deep grooves, I made a mistake. I should have put these in first and drawn a line here. These are the upper doors. So the top, it's a 2.5 inch wide, 2.5 inch wide, and on the bottom, I made it 3 inches. It's aesthetically more pleasing, but it gives just that much more oomph to the door, a little more strength there. Make sure that's flush on the bottom. Draw your line. And then what you want to do is you want to measure from this line here to this line here and add 1 inch, which I've already done. So we'll slide this in here. I'm going to eyeball it for a moment. This is very snug, I know that. I already did a test fit. So I'm tapping that in there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap that. Now this is just a dry fit. I have not applied glue. There we go. The bottom one in. I've marked some of these parts out. So you want to get in the habit of having your orientation when you're assembling the same every time. So I'm going to have all the nicest face of these pieces towards me. The inside, if it's not as nice, it doesn't matter. It's going to get sanded, primed, and painted. So it'll be just as nice as the front. But when I'm assembling them, it's just something I like to keep in mind. There's a lot of reasons why you might have a nice side versus a not a nice side. So there we go. This one's already been cleaned out. There you go. So now when I put this together, for permanence, I'll make sure I line this all right. Now right now, if this isn't flush here, I'll trim the tenon a little bit to make that flush because these heights here, these parts are exactly what I want them to be. So I want to make sure I get these stiles here to be exactly flush with the cut ends, the end grain on the long, tall pieces. Now, when I glue these together, I'll use a little brush and I'll make sure I get plenty of glue all the way around, across the top and all the edges of the tenon. And I'll put a little bit inside the mortise. I'll run a brush in there with some glue and I'll make sure I get some glue. I'll dab some right along here. I'll put everything together. I'll make sure everything's aligned. If I have to, let's say there's an issue with here. It's not exactly perfect. I might put a clamp on here, right, to hold these so that they're perfectly flush. And then I'll put this clamp on. I'll take my square, which is right in front of me, and I'll just double check my inside square on this. These are already perfect. Now, it's perfect. That's what you want. The reason why this is turning out to be perfect is that I took the time. You saw it. Took me forever. I milled all these parts so that they're all exactly, perfectly 90 degrees to one another. Every one of these edges. Okay? It's perfect. Now you have to absolutely shoot for perfection when you're milling this material, so that when you lay it up on your machine and you get a square cut, it's square. So when I do my grooves, they're all exactly the same. So when I do the way I cut my tenons on the table saw, they're exactly perfect. Everything is exactly perfect. If it's not exactly perfect, you're going to run into problems. So that's it for now. I'm not going to go through the process of making all these doors. You see what I just did. I also use this here. I'll fill this up with water. And when I clamp it, there's going to be squeeze out, and I'll wipe it down. It's totally fine. Before I sand, I'm going to wipe them down with water anyhow. I'm going to avoid getting water on the MDF here. Why MDF? Because it doesn't matter for one thing. It's just a panel. But this takes paint really, really well. Better than a plywood. And you're fine. I'll put a couple drops of glue in the groove for the panel. I don't need this to float and move around. If I've been a little, I cut them slightly small. I'm sure everything will be fine. I guess I just do that to ensure that everything's going to lock and there won't be any rattle with the panel afterwards. But because I'm going to prime and paint all of this, that should get into that little bit. If there's any little tiny micro gap, like there is a slight bit of a gap on this side here, the primer and paint will get in there and seal this. But I just like doing that for a little extra caution. But now this is a weird construction. Most of you have not seen this before. I did story poles and all that. I'm building the doors first, and then my frame, it's not a one-piece face frame. I'm actually assembling this when I get in there, and I've got to scribe some of my frame rails to fit the wall right. So I've got to do that, make sure it's perfectly plumb, and then off of that one side, I'm going to have a stretcher bar that separates the upper cabinet from the lower cabinet. It's precisely cut, and that'll lock into place. I'll have like a joinery sort of mechanism I will have made, and that'll give me exactly where the next one has to be, so that I know these doors are going to fit without me having to trim them. So as long as I make sure I get that next end panel in and get that scribed to the wall correct, make sure that that distance is exactly correct, so that this corner is perfectly square, all my doors are going to work. It'll all fall into place. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for just, your average cabinet guy or installer. They're not used to this sort of thinking. And look, I'm putting way more work into this than the people did over 100 years ago when they built, or about 100 years ago when they built that house, and prior. Those built-in cabinets that you see or you find in the houses, they were most of that was all built on site, and not to the precision of this, and they worked fine forever. So, well, until I came along, right? Until somebody else came along and ripped that out. The big reason a lot of these old cabinets were removed was just to update, for one thing, right? There's an aesthetic design thing that people want, but also just modern appliances. Old counters weren't as deep as our modern ones are. Upper cabinets came much closer to the countertops, so you can't fit appliances on the countertops. So that's the reason why cabinets changed. They got deeper, and the space from the top of the counter to the bottom of the wall hung cabinets became greater. The upper cabinets got a little bit deeper. That's what we find now with modern stuff. I don't know if my top of my head's cut off here or not. I didn't set up the camera for that part of the conversation here. But I hope this helps you. You see what I'm doing. Once these doors are done, the rest of this project should go a lot quicker. I have to decide what I'm doing for inside shelving. It's going to be plywood. I'm going to be milling up hardwood front edges so that that won't sag. 200-pound man will be able to climb on that, no problem. And the front edges of those shelves I put in are going to come right up to the backs of these doors. So I'll be able to put my catches for the doors right on the bottom of a shelf in there to lock everything in. I'm also considering on the rail that separates the upper cabinets from the lower cabinets, I'm thinking about making it so that that shelf, instead of it being flush with the top of that rail, I'm considering having the shelf step up a half of an inch or so that when the upper door closes, it registers tight to the front edge of that shelf. That's how they used to do it in the old days. I'm trying to duplicate a lot of these details. That's it for now. Thanks for being here. I think I'm posting this now. It's be like the third video today. Have a good day. Be good to one another. Catch you in the next one.